Okay, welcome back, everyone. So in this lecture, we're going to finish up chapter 8 on culture and structure. Okay, so getting back to the very first week, we defined an organization as a group of people who work together to achieve some specific purpose. And then the role of management is to ensure that the pursuit of organizational goals are done efficiently and effectively. And in order to accomplish that, managers, there are 4 functions that managers perform in order to pursue organizational goals efficiently and effectively. And so the course is basically divided up into these 4 processes. And so we just completed the first process, which is planning. And in that process, if you recall, basically what we did was we talked about planning a strategy for a company, which is a high-level goal that sets the direction of a company, sets sort of high-level objectives, and it's a way in which the company hopefully is able to generate above average returns consistently. And then the next step in that process is organizing. And so that's what we have started this week. And organizing is about coordinating all of the people, the tasks, the resources of the company, coordinating them in a way so that they can achieve the objectives of the strategy that they planned for. And so in this chapter, we talk about culture and company structure, because these are 2 ways in which you can organize the people and the resources of the company to achieve its objectives. And so in the first half of the lecture, we talked about culture, and just to quickly summarize culture, culture is the shared set of assumptions that affect how work gets done. You can characterize it as like a personality, the personality of the company. And the culture, the company's culture is created by like the values it adheres to. So the values and mission that it sets out in those sort of founding documents, the values and mission statements, that really begins the process of developing the culture of the company. It's also created through the symbols and rituals it adopts, through the stories and myths that it tells. And then this culture is implemented and reproduced throughout the organization through a process of socialization and training, right? So the people that you work with, they're going to inform you, like when you get hired for a company, you're going to learn about the culture through the people, in part through the people that you work with, because they're going to inform you about what is expected, what those shared set of assumptions about how work gets accomplished in that company, what they are. And then there will be sort of rewards and sanctions based on your ability to adopt and embrace and fit in within those within that culture. There'll also be more formal training, right? So obviously employees are trained, and they're going to be trained in a particular way that the company wants you to behave, and in the way that the company wants you to perform. So collectively, those sort of systems, those social processes will develop a particular kind of culture for a company. And that culture is going to motivate workers, it's going to motivate the employees to get the tasks done that they need to get done so that the company can achieve its strategic objectives. And then, I don't know, just to give you sort of an example to make this more concrete, I'll typically contrast banking organizations against tech companies. So banking organizations have a particular character about them, a particular personality. they could be seen as, and they actually are, very sort of formal organizations, very serious organizations. And so that's reflected in very formal dress. So you're expected to wear formal business attire, so things like suits. And also there might be a culture around how hard you work. If you're in investment banking and working at one of these big banks, the expectation is that you're going to be working there constantly. I mean, essentially they take over your life. And you're going to learn about this through the other members of the organization acting in that way, right? And so when the entire team that you work with is, beginning work at a certain time and ending work at a certain time, that's an indication of what is expected of you within an organization. And you can contrast that against, let's say, a tech firm where it's very informal, where the dress is, you can probably wear shorts and a t-shirt. At a tech company, that's probably what's expected. That's not something you can get away with in a bank. And it would be a little weird probably for you to show up at a tech startup, let's say, in a suit. And so the differences there are differences in culture. And the thinking is that these kinds of cultures produce certain kinds of outcomes that are appropriate for what those companies are trying to achieve. They're trying to achieve different kinds of objectives when you compare banks, investment banks, and let's say tech companies. And so a different kind of culture is warranted. Now, cultures work hand in hand with the organizational structure. They reinforce each other. And both of these work to determine the sort of attitudes of your employees and their effectiveness. And so ultimately, it has a large impact on outcomes for your organization. I began the cultural lecture with sort of a dramatic example, which shows just how powerful culture can be by telling you the story of Jim Jones and the cult that he established. And basically, his organization, through the very strong culture he was able to develop, he eventually was, able to get his members to abandon, their roots in California, uproot their lives, move to a whole new country. And they really moved into sort of like the middle of nowhere. It was this like very rural, sort of wild settlement that they established deep in the country of Guyana, and eventually motivated them to kill themselves. And he had this impact on nearly 1,000 people. And it's sort of just a dramatic way of illustrating just how powerful a culture can be on someone's behavior. And so culture is very important, and combined with an organizational structure, this goes a long way in sort of determining ultimately the behavior of employees. So moving on to the organizational structure piece, there are 3 ways. There's lots of ways you can characterize an organization structure. So one way is here through what their ultimate sort of financial goal is. And 3 types of organizations are listed here. You can have a for-profit organization, nonprofit, and mutual benefit organization. A for-profit organization is your typical company whose aim is to generate a profit, right? And this happens when the amount of revenues your company is able to generate exceeds the amount of expenses the organization incurs. And whatever that difference is the company's profit. and the company's profit is paid to the owners. So the owners of the company are going to want to maximize profits, and that characterizes a for-profit organization. Most companies are for-profit organizations, so companies like Google, the tech companies, or banks like Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley. These are all for-profit organizations. Nonprofit organizations, their aim is not to maximize profits or even to generate profits. Their aim is to serve the interests of some base of clients. And an example of this are hospitals. Many hospitals are nonprofits, or even Baruch College, right? And so the way that these are organized is the revenue that is generated, all of that revenue needs to be spent on whatever the organization's purpose is. And so for Baruch, its purpose, let's say, is to teach students, right? So its revenues need to be spent on activities that go toward teaching students. So it can't be pocketed by the president of the organization, right? And there's actually systems in place. So if you want to establish a nonprofit, a charity in New York State, you have to file with the Charities Bureau in New York State. And so you establish yourself as a nonprofit, and then you're going to be required every year to file financial paperwork with New York State, which shows that all of the revenue that you generate is actually going towards whatever purpose your nonprofit is supposed to be serving. So that characterizes a nonprofit organization. And then a mutual benefit organization is voluntary collectives whose purpose is to advance members' interests. And so the members will depend on the type of mutual benefit organization. So an example is a union, right? A union is an organization, let's say a labor union, as an example, is an organization whose purpose is to serve the interest of some set of workers, right? And so they are typically grouped around the type of work that you do, right? So a steam fitters union. Steam fitters are workers who install sprinkler systems in buildings. And so very similar to plumbing. They deal with pipes, but they have their own union. And so this union works to serve the interests of steam fitters. And so they'll negotiate pay packages, benefit packages. And so they basically advocate for steam fitters. And the whole point of the organization is to improve the working conditions, the working outcomes of steam fitters. So that's mutual benefit organizations. So that's a way of sort of describing different types of organizational structures. Another way of understanding a structure of an organization is by looking at the organization chart. And this is actually called a box and line illustration here. And this is important to know. Every company will have something like this. And the purpose of this diagram, this box and line illustration, is it reveals two kinds of information. Vertically, let me get my pointer. Hold on. Here we go. All right, so if you look at this chart vertically, this chart shows the hierarchy of authority, which is who is it that reports to who. So here, the director of admissions is someone, whoever occupies that position, the director of admissions has to report to the executive administrative director, right? And then the executive administrative director has to report to the president. And then the president is going to report to the CEO, and the CEO is going to report to the board of directors. So there's a clear line of authority. So the board of directors has authority over the CEO has authority over the president, right? The president has authority over the executive administrative director, and then the executive administrative director has authority over all of these people who occupy these positions. And the same thing is on this side as well. So that's what an organizational chart does. It shows you on the vertical the hierarchy of authority. And you can see that there's, in this particular organization, there's many levels. So this is a hierarchical kind of organization rather than a flat organization, right? So there's many levels here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, we have 5 different levels. Now, horizontally, the horizontal sort of axis here in this chart shows the company's specialization. It's who specializes in what kind of work. And so you can see down here, there's someone who specializes in personnel, patient and public relations, accounting, and then this is on the administrative side. And then here on the medical side, and by the way, this is an organizational chart for a hospital. And so here's sort of like the administration end. And as we go further along the horizontal axis, we get into medical specializations, so X-ray and lab services, pharmacy, et cetera. So this is the kind of information that you can get out of an organization chart. Again, vertical hierarchy shows you the authority, the hierarchy of authority within the company, and then the specialization, who does what kind of work, is on the horizontal. And then so another way of describing organizational structures is to look at the types of organizational structures. Your textbook is actually going to list it goes into lots of different kinds of organizational structures. Some of these, though, are a lot more prevalent than others. Some of these are sort of recent innovations in thinking about how to design an organization. And there's some debate over the effectiveness of all of these different kinds. So you can learn about all of these different kinds by going through your textbook. I'm just going to focus on a few that are the most popular, the most prevalent within industry, the kinds of organizational structures that you will likely encounter and be a member of. And so the first type is a simple structure. And this is, it may be as simple as just a couple of people, right? An owner of a company and maybe an administrative assistant. But this, even though it's very simple and obviously very tiny, this actually makes up many, many, many hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of organizations in our economy, because this is the kind of structure that you will find in a small company, right? So if you're like, let's say, an independent web designer, your structure may look something like this, right? As the owner operator, you handle all of the web design for your company, and then with the sort of handling the books and maybe the business end, you would hire maybe someone to help you with that, or just to field phone calls and things like this, or help with the emails. You may hire an assistant. And so this is actually a very popular structure within organizations. Even like, so many years ago, I used to actually invest in like small local companies. And they were actually just companies run by friends of mine. And so like they would start landscaping companies, construction companies, concrete. I had a concrete company at one point. And they were all structured in this way, right? So your local sort of landscaping company is going to probably have a structure similar to this. And basically there would be the owner, and often the owner was also an operator, right? So they would be out there cutting lawns, and then they would hire one other person to help with sort of the customer service end. So while they're out and about cutting lawns and actually getting the work done, any kind of customer inquiries or sales calls or just billing concerns, things like this, they would have an assistant. I tried to, so I owned a number of different, I owned a number of these kinds of companies, and I tried to sort of streamline the structure of the organization by having like a common administration layer, right? So all of these companies would share the same administrative assistant, right? And we would get like, we rented out a small office, and that all of these companies would share. There wasn't actually much efficiency gained, I think, from that. But yeah, so these types of companies, your local construction company, landscaping company, or concrete company, I don't know, termites, things like that, they'll be structured in this way. Another type of structure is a functional structure. And in a functional structure, the workers in the organization are grouped along the function that they actually serve, right? And so in the example here, for a typical business, right, you may have a president, and then you have a vice president of marketing, vice president of finance, production, human resources. And so you can see that marketing and financing are different functions that need to be done within a company, and that the people within that company are organized along those different functions. So the finance people will all work together. The people working in the marketing function, they will all be grouped together. And here's another example in a hospital. So chief of medical services, so people actually delivering medical services, they'll be all grouped together. The people doing administrative work, they'll be grouped together, etc. And so this is actually a very typical structure that you're going to find in companies, that you'll find that companies group their workers according to the function that they serve. And here is a divisional structure. And so in a divisional structure, people are put together in groups by similar products or similar customers or even geographic regions, right? So if the divisional structure is along product lines, right, your company structure will look something like this. So the media and entertainment company Time Warner is structured in this way, right? And so people are grouped according to the kind of product that they work on, right? So instead of being grouped, let's say, according to finance or marketing, they're grouped according to whether they work on movies, or whether they work on music, or books or magazines or internet products. And so people in different functions will be grouped together according to the product that they are collectively working on. And so that's what a product division, you can also have a division by customer, right? So this is like a mortgage company, a lending company. And so if you lend to consumers, you'll be part of one group. But if you lend to businesses, right, you will be part of another group. And so all of the people who work on business loans will work together in a common group. Everyone who works in consumer loans, they'll work together in a common group. Or you can do it by region. Dividing a company along regional lines, this is often done within governments. That's typically where you would see this kind of structure. And that is a divisional structure. So this is, and so those are the three sort of most, is that, yeah. So the basic, a simple structure, functional structure, and divisional structure, those are the most common kinds of structures that you will find. And let me just, So I just wanted to flip to this particular slide. This is the slide that I will end this lecture on. And so, I mean, the basic idea here is that once you have a plan in place, right, now the task at hand for management is to motivate the employees to actually do the work that needs to get done in order to achieve the objectives set forth in the company strategy. And culture is one way of doing that, establishing the right kind of culture. And the kind of culture that you want to adopt depends on the kinds of strategies that you are targeting. A startup company that's going through lots of drastic changes will have a different kind of culture than a company, let's say, that's more mature and let's say building airplanes. So like Boeing that builds airplanes, they have to stick to very strict protocols to ensure the safety of the planes that they are actually producing. And so the culture developed there around, you know, safety and accuracy in their productive process is going to be very different than the culture of, let's say, a internet startup, where in the internet startup, not only is it, you know, okay to sort of break things as you go along, but that's encouraged because you want to sort of experiment with what's possible. And if you break something on the internet, nobody dies. But if you break something on a plane, you know, people's lives are at stake. So culture is one way of motivating workers to get the work done that needs to get done to achieve your strategic objectives. And then the actual company structure, the organizational structure that you put in place will also serve the strategic goals. And that structure has to align with where the company's at according to whatever strategy it's adopting. And again, you know, a mature company that's not engaged in a lot of innovation is going to be structured very differently than, let's say, a startup that needs to be very flexible and is in a very volatile sort of competitive environment, and they have to constantly adapt and constantly change. And so you want to adopt a more flexible organizational structure and a culture that sort of encourages the ability to, or the desire to try new things. So I think that wraps up chapter 8 for us, linking your company strategy with the culture and structure of your organization. Okay, so I will see everyone on, well, I'll see everyone next week.